All right, I think we're ready to go ahead and get started. Welcome to our Lunchtime Learning with Dr. Juanita Simmons and MJJA's Stop Red. If you will be requesting CLE credit, I will put the course code in the chat. It's 776985. Feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. Nope, sorry, I was admitting somebody. Throughout the presentation by the use of the chat box or just take yourself off mute. If you're not speaking, we do like it for you to mute yourself out of respect for our speaker. Please take the survey at the end of the session. It's vital for our grant funding and to make improvements. The recording, along with other past sessions, will be available on stopred.org, typically by the end of the week. I want to take the time to thank our funding source. Funds are made available for this project through the Missouri Department of Public Safety and the Missouri Juvenile Justice Advisory Group from funding provided by the U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Simmons.
Good afternoon to everyone. We are so happy that you have stopped to join us today. We are just honored to introduce to you one of the most outstanding certified social workers in America. I believe after reading her background, I'm very impressed. But we have today to speak to you on school discipline to incarceration, special education, resiliency, and reentry. Shannon McFadden. Let me tell you a quick background on Shannon, and you can just look her up more so that she'll have time for this platform. But she does have a master's of social work. She's a certified psychiatric rehabilitative practitioner, child and family resiliency practitioner. She has all of these outstanding certifications in social work. But I love the fact that she is going beyond the trauma-informed counseling and specializing in resiliency. She says after the trauma and the counseling, then what? And so this is what she will talk to us about today. She concentrates on education and human services as a consultant, director of behavioral health services, and she is also the founder of the Jerome McFadden Educational Center in the name of her father. Let me give it to her, the outstanding Shannon McFadden.
Thank you, Dr. Simmons. I don't even know how to come after that with my own introduction. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Shannon McFadden, and I'm actually glad that this is very informal. I'm so used to, things being more formalized and it being really about checking a box to get a training done. But because we are here today and we are really here to have discussion, I'm really looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to what you guys can bring to the table as far as ideas when you see the presentation, how we can discuss, how we can improve systemic things, and just how we can best support youth. I hail from Baltimore, Maryland, and as you know that, we've been in the news a few times for our decline in violent crime in Baltimore over the past year, which is amazing. It's a testament to Mayor Brandon Scott, as well as his boots on the ground initiatives, some of them being Safe Streets, really funding programs that do things like we have a Stop the Beef hotline where people can call in and help mitigate and help decrease altercations from happening before they even start to help improve community connections. So without further ado, because I am very, very big on making sure people have their time and people's time is not wasted, we're going to get started. Again, please feel free to use the chat, call out, talk. This is really a conversation. So the slides are just here to help me keep my train of thought because I do have anxiety and sometimes I can go a little off. So this is really more so to help me and just help us structure and guide the conversation. So of course, learning objectives, because you also are getting some credits for this. And I know how those things operate. We'll examine trends and disparities in Missouri's out of school suspensions. Attendees will examine how exclusionary school discipline can lead to increased chances of chronic incarceration. And those are the people, the kids, the adults who are constantly being incarcerated. They rather have their three hats in a cot than be out on the street. Attendees will also develop tools and strategies for assisting youth with building resilience and trust after out of school suspension and incarceration. So even though we're going to talk a little bit about incarceration, as I was doing a deeper dive, I try to make sure that everything I do is based and centered on the population that I'm presenting to and have a conversation with. Out of school suspensions have had a really, really high uptick in Missouri since COVID. And I would really love to hear everyone's thoughts and opinions about that. So again, this is me, a little bit about me. And yeah, focus on trauma. But beyond trauma, what does it look like to become resilient? What does it look like to build up after the traumatic event has happened? Our traumas don't make us. They are things that we just experience. They are part of our everyday life. So how do we move past them so that we don't sit in them and allow them to cause us further harm? We're here to engage in meaningful conversations. Being trauma-informed extends past our clientele and our kids. It applies to us. So please be kind. I was going to show my age and put, please be kind and rewind like Blockbuster. But I was like, I don't know. Somebody might not get it. Share from your experiences as you feel comfortable. And again, this is informal. Feel free to discuss, share, and provide any insight that I may have missed. All right. So for our first icebreaker, I want everyone to think about a risk factor and a protective factor that they have in their life. And it's important that you do this because we're going to come back to it later. But think about a risk factor and a protective factor you've had in your life, something that increases your chances of incarceration or out of school suspension, and something that decreases your chances of incarceration and out of school suspension. And if anyone would like to share, please feel free to share at any moment.
I would assume you were talking about not necessarily short term, but like 180 or something like that is what you're asking. If they were suspended, say, for a whole school year, they have much more time on their hands to find negative things to get into. It would be, I guess, my answer. And if there's a way to get an alternative education that would decrease that, ability to have that time on your hands, so to speak.
Yeah, but that's later on. Like right now, think about your own life and what is something that is in your life or your childhood that potentially that was a risk factor to cause incarceration in your life as you as the individual, and something that also was in your life that decreased it. What was a protective factor? Like, for example, for me, my risk factor was that I survived a sexual assault. That's a risk factor because that could have influenced some behaviors, which could have caused me to get some school disciplinary issues, which then could have caused some risky behaviors, which then could have caused me to go down a path of drugs and alcohol, et cetera, et cetera. My protective factor is that I have a very, very loving and supporting family. So even though I was going through something traumatic, they were able to support and love me enough to help me work through that. I saw some things in the chat. I hope that cleared it up, Amanda.
Yes, I could answer that question a little better. And I apologize, I wasn't realizing expected personalization.
No, you're fine.
I would say mine would be divided home, two-parent home, different homes for a risk factor. And then a protective barrier would be within that, there was support and also good support in the community, like church involvement.
Oh, that's a good one, because we don't focus on community that much when we talk about protective factors. I saw some people in the chat.
Hi, Shannon.
Hi, go ahead.
I'm in the car, so I'm sorry, I can't see anything. I would say my father passing when I was 12, leaving my mother with 3 daughters to raise alone was a risk factor. It could have gone poorly. But by the same token, he was such an involved father when he was alive. So it left us, stronger than we would have been if he had just been, just
Yeah.
a breadwinner. But he was so involved. So I would say kind of a double whammy there.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because even though he transitioned, he was still present enough and imparted enough in you that you were able to still glean from it as you got older. And that is a double whammy. That's a good one. Cheryl Davis said a risk factor is family alcoholism, protective factor, supportive mentors. Christina Jones, friends and family at different times, they function differently, which is a very good point. We're going to get to that when we talk about protective factors and risk factors. Camber said sibling drug abuse, protective, supported friends and extended family. These are really good. Brittany said risk factor, mother suffered from depression, and that is a difficult one, especially in low socioeconomic status communities where mental health is not addressed, and you have a parent, your caregiver, who's supposed to be the nurturing thing. Society tells you they're supposed to be this thing, but they have their own mental health that's prohibiting from being this thing, and how that can influence children. One of my favorite African proverbs is, I'm going to butcher it. It says, if a child doesn't feel loved by the village, it will burn it down to feel its warmth. So really think about that as we continue to have this conversation, and as you go through and work with the kids that you work through. Protective factor, joining sports. Oh, sports is a good one. Sports is very good. It is that teamwork, that camaraderie, the feeling of belonging. That's why children join games, because they want to feel loved and belonged. Tara talked about the uptick in out of school suspensions post-COVID, that the success, quote unquote, of online learning during COVID has enabled schools to offer this equitable form of education to youth. Tara, can you explain more about that?
I think when COVID happened, everybody saw online education as a successful thing. Kids were still able to get their education. When COVID ended, if you will, and the return to school happened, I think, at least in my area, we're seeing that it's easy to suspend schools, knowing that online education can be very successful for some students. And there wasn't that pressing issue of get them back into school, transition them back into school. Well, this is equitable out here. We're just going to leave it there. And there wasn't that urgency to transition the kids back into their home setting. And online education, at least for justice involved kids, is not equitable education. It's just not. It's just not.
Even for children who are not justice involved, I watched my daughter, who was a GT AP student, struggle with online learning. Struggled because kids need to be active, they need to touch, they need to hold. And we're going to get to that also. All right, out of school suspension. What is it? Can somebody tell me what?
Can I say something? I just got a question more than anything. What happens when my risk factors? So for me, one of my risk factors was poverty, but then one of my supportive factors was gang members, right? So so for me, I don't know if it was maybe the trauma of both of those onsets that finally allowed me to recognize how important education was. But I sincerely don't feel like I would have obtained my degree if I had not gone down that trauma-informed path.
Can you explain that to some people who may not quite understand how, even though gangs, and I use the quotes, because we also know that they call the Black Panther Party a gang, could be nurturing and how that assisted you in becoming the man that you are today?
Sure. I mean, it's the family uh, component of it. There's a hierarchy component of it, and in that hierarchy, you strive to be better. You strive to be better um, than your expectations are, and it's not different from what I would like to call like outer families who are not biologically your family, but you consider them family and you hold them to some of the same expectations that you would hold your biological family to. So, even though there might have been a bad setting, it gave me a good jump off platform.
I like that because a lot of our youth turn to gangs because their nuclear family, their bio family, is not the healthiest. So,
Yeah.
as community-based organizations, I know that there's a struggle with getting kids from gang environments and then trying to put them in different places where they can learn coping skills and conflict resolution strategies and all of these things. But we forget that with the gangs, it's actually a family. It's actually someone looking out for me and someone taking care of me and someone making sure that. And I taught kids that were in gangs, and I remember one particular student, he was failing my class, and I guess his OG came to the school for parent teacher conference night and threatened him and said he better get it together because, we weren't having it. But his parents couldn't show up, but his OG did. So how do you break a kid from that when that is their positive, that is their protective risk factor, that's their protective factor, that is the positive thing. And then we're telling kids that who they are trusting, who is building their resilience up, is bad. But then when they come to school, we suspend them. And when they come back, we don't build them back up again. And we wonder why they turn to the streets. Thank you, Mr. Hall. I appreciate that. That was really good insight. We have somebody in the chat. I can't open it right now. But again, if you want to say something, just call out. This is very informal. One of the things that I focus on are kids with intellectual and developmental disabilities, adults with developmental disabilities, and their ability to process and communicate. And when you have a developmental disability, you have a deficit in your practical domain, your social domain, and your conceptual domain, which means socially, you may miss nuances, you may miss how to give people personal space, little things. You have shorter attention spans, you have difficulties learning new concepts, you can't hold on to old ones. Problem solving is an issue. You can't go past the concrete level of thinking. And when we look at the data, because we love data in America, children who have an IDD are 65% to 75% more likely to be incarcerated. These children are also the ones that are more likely to be suspended and have extended out of school suspension time. If anyone on this call, what are your experiences with that? As far as if you work in a school, can you tell me your experiences with the special education kids and how they are disciplined in the school that you work in, if you work in a school? Or if you just work in a community-based organization and work with youth, what are your experiences with this population specifically and how they are disciplined?
So back when I was a juvenile officer in the delinquency, the loss status violations, I feel like I had a lot of youth on my caseload who had behavioral IEPs I can remember one youth who had 20 referrals for assault.
Wow.
And in my opinion, I feel like the majority of those didn't have to come to us. I think that if the schools could handle those themselves somehow, at some point, absolutely, there needed to be more intervention. But when I had youth on my caseload with those behavioral IEPs, I usually saw more assault coming through.
And it's interesting because assault is a form of communication. I use this example all the time. You have a kid who has issues with communicating. They come from a home, not even just to come from a home, they finally got their favorite pencil that they've been wanting, because we also know that there are kids who get stuck in with certain things. Like one of my nephews, he loves to line his cars up. Please do not disturb this boy's line of cars, because you're going to hear from him. He likes his cars a certain way. He likes them placed by size, color, all of that good stuff. So you have a kid who finally has that favorite pencil, and they are fixated on this pencil. And they are in the 7th grade, which means they are probably bigger than me because I'm 4'11". And the teacher tries to get his attention. He's busy playing with the pencil because he's focused on it. And the teacher takes the pencil and the child hits the teacher. What happens to that child after that?
I think I'm in a juvenile detention facility and school within the detention facility. And I think some of the things that we see is we find out that youth have an IEP or 504. We struggle with the school sharing information about that with us because we're not considered the educational decision makers for that child because they still have a parent. When we finally get that information, because for lack of a better term, they're living here with us, we need to know how to support them, not just during school hours, but at home, if you will. We're finding that there are not good goals in the IEPs. There are not adequate services to meet the level of needs for these youth. And we don't have a lot of parents that are good advocates for their child through the IEP or 504 process. And so it's already it's a cart behind the horse kind of a situation. Is how do you rectify they've been noted as they need the service, but it's not adequate for them. And then we just continue to receive referrals for those behaviors that are supposed to be addressed through the IEP.
And one of the things that we've, not just in Missouri, but in Maryland also, have come across is that in Rhode Island, there's a huge disconnect between services provided, even within the juvenile detention center, the school-based person and the residential don't even have that much contact where they're able to share information. And when you're looking at it from that perspective about the goals, 9 times out of 10, the interventions that are selected are cookie cutter. And I actually presented this at the CJJ conference in May, that there is a template of the goals and the interventions that are not even specific to the diagnosis of the child. So unfortunately, what you're getting is a cookie cutter IEP that does not provide person-centered interventions based on that child's particular risk factors, protective factors, their actual cognitive level. Can they actually understand the interventions and what the interventions are for? Because if I have an IEP, I should know what's in my IEP. I should be able to understand my IEP. I should be able to buy into my IEP. And then how does that translate to juvenile detention centers when the schools don't even talk to you all, but want you to rehabilitate the child before bringing them back into the school system? Is that what you're saying, Tara?
Absolutely. And it is, so if a kid has an IEP at their home school but comes to detention, they rewrite the IEP for placement in this type of facility. For example, we had a youth here, he was a long time because it was a post-certified youth. And our staff were asking, can we get speech for this kid? We can't understand what he's saying. And this was months of this going on. Oh, he's supposed to be having speech through his IEP, and the school wasn't, they said, we didn't think you'd allow it. Heck yes, I'd allow it. Get them out here. We need to be able to communicate with this kid. So, but they rewrite it for this setting, and it's not helping the kid.
And unfortunately, like I said, that's everywhere. One of the things that and we're going to talk about this as well, is that there are new studies that show how children who have communication disorders and cognitive disorders and who are in juvenile detention facilities actually have lower recidivism rates once they work with a speech and language pathologist and they receive applied behavioral analysis. So the very things that we give children who have autism work well with youth who are in residential treatment centers. And Liz, I can send you those articles as well, so that way people can have them. But one of the things that we're talking about with this is, how do we get that kid who has been suspended numerous times and is coming back to the classroom, that kid who has been incarcerated, how do we bring them back in a way that builds their trust back into the system when it's been tainted for so long? And one of the things that we need to talk about are the actual school disciplinary practices. Out of school suspension to me should be a very, very last resort. It should be. There are some kids who need to be placed elsewhere, but the percentage has to be less than 0.1. Let's be very clear. Most children are not committing so many infractions that it puts the entirety of the school body at risk. And that is where out of school suspensions occur. So given that in your practice and what you see in your everyday lives as far as working with these kids, what are some of the bigger things what are some of the infractions or the issues that you all see that you feel could be handled differently in the school system?
In our school system, our main school system in our county, in our jurisdiction, they require any kid that receives a felony referral to the juvenile office to go through a special process before coming back to school. Not a safe school violation, any felony. So stealing grandma's car is felony tampering.
Oh, wow.
That's not a safety and security risk to others. So we see them more restrictive in that manner.
And how do you think that translates into the adult population that's incarcerated?
School to prison pipeline is what I go back to all the time. Sorry, but that's what it is. When a kid's job is to be in school and that's not happening, they're in the community, idle hands, and they keep getting further involved when they don't have appropriate, positive, pro-social things in place for them.
And what does that do with the number of risk factors that kids have versus the number of protective factors that kids have?
Right. You're removing a lot of the sources of support that youth does see in their life, and they're turning to those risk factor areas.
Does anybody else have any feedback, insight? Oh, wait, I see some people in the chat. Dr. Simmons said that she knows the greatest disparities in SPAR referrals are African-American males diagnosed as emotionally disturbed. And unfortunately, that is one of the biggest misdiagnoses and misdiagnosed populations in the United States. Emotionally disturbed just means that trauma happened to me. No one taught me how to process it. So now, instead of me being able to say, I'm hurt because, and me then building resilience back up into this child, I'm going to punch a hole in the wall, because that is my way of communicating when I'm upset, because I feel threatened. My amygdala is going off. It's pinging all over the place because this is an unsafe environment. And instead of you asking me what is wrong and what happened to me, you give me a diagnosis of emotionally disturbed, when all it is that I don't know how to effectively communicate, which goes back to speech and language pathology. Yes, sir, Mr. Hall.
I love how all the connections are coming back to the emotional connections that we're making with our youth, even outside of schools, even in the juvenile system. And I think that that vicious cycle that happens that just completely twirls like you're waiting for something to download. It just completely just goes around and around and around. And I don't think that the system is the problem. I don't think that a student having to go through a program before he comes back to school. I don't think that's an issue. I think that the reentry, we like to call it at my high school in Maine here, we like to call it a soft landing. Okay, because once a student has been outside of school, we're dealing with learning loss, we're dealing with emotional insecurities, we're dealing with uh, um, poverty or the lack of resources, and so when they come back to school, it can be a lot. So so a soft landing is huge, and that really is even more important when a student is coming back from felonious activities or jail time. So maybe that could help with some of that cycle.
No, you're absolutely correct. And that's how you build resilience. When a child is disconnected from school, it's not just like you said, the loss of learning time. It's the and I can't remember who said it, but that the loss of that emotional community. A lot teachers spend more time with children than parents do in elementary, middle school. I literally, when I taught elementary school, I had kids from 7:30 in the morning to about 4 o'clock in the evening. And then they would go home to their parents and they would go to sleep. I would wake up and I would see these same kids. It was to the point where I had to bring snacks in the morning. I had to bring juice boxes because some of the kids didn't eat. I'm tying a shoe. I'm patting. I taught special ed, y'all. So boundaries were a little bit less important. You can do more things instead. And I'm rocking one kid while they're having a tantrum while teaching with one hand. And I still have kids reach out to me to this day. And I taught them in 2007, 2008, because that community is important. And in order for us to be able to build the resilience back in our youth when they are returning from incarceration or out of school suspension, we need to create a more emotionally safe and inclusive community. We know about the risk factors that are associated with crime, and a lot of organizations, present company included, do a really good job of attacking these risk factors. We help kids get internships over the summer. In Baltimore, they have something called Youth Works, where kids are able to work during the summertime and get paid. So they're able to make some money. We have, safe streets programs and anti-drug campaigns, and we try to create family therapeutic environments where we attack the risk factors and try to increase the protective factors. But one of the things that we're missing is that resiliency piece, because now that we got rid of this risk factor, what? I'm still suspended, and I still have to come back, and I still have to trust you. And I don't trust you because the moment I make a mistake, because I'm unaware of what I'm doing, or because no one taught me better, you're going to exclude me again. So I've come to realize that my behavior is causing me to be excluded from things. And again, like I said, my favorite African proverb, if a child feels the cold of the village, they will burn it down to feel its warmth. It will burn it down. I don't want to get burned. So I try to pour into. So one of the things that I really, really love that a lot of places are pushing are the restorative justice circles in the schools and in like the different detention centers. Can someone tell me what their thoughts are on restorative justice circles?
Can I speak?
Sure. And who are you? Because I don't see you on the thing.
I'm sorry, my name is Rodney Wilson.
Hi, Rodney.
How you doing? How you doing? Come from St. Louis. Um, my thoughts on that is, I think it's a huge step towards really becoming more involved in a lot of children's lives as far as around that area. Me being a person who's been incarcerated before, and then coming out of prison and being in like youth leadership programs where I'm a mentor, and then just finding human services to be one of my interests, and that's what I took up in college once I came home from prison. And
Congratulations.
just trying to like through the process, I was a little young, 22, but just through the process, like if you can kind of catch them before that, and I had some Roka training too, and that also helped me to kind of understand as far as the levels of being able to reach a child depending on their level of intensity, if they can comprehend or if they want to take the help. It's needed. I feel like it's needed, and the fact that they doing it, that's showing that they paying attention. But it's just like a few other people said in the chat. It's surrounded by just being involved, being cared for, being guided into who you want to be, because a lot of the children don't know who they are, and then that forces them to find gangs or to venture off in other things. But we send them to school and we expect them to just learn everything or know everything. But it's like, yeah, the school get them attention, the school get them love. When they not out of school, they still need to get their reassurance. And then once they don't, they wander off. We all wander off. So it's just more so like the fact that they doing it, that's great. That's like what they supposed to pay attention to now. But it's been that same thing for the longest, and all we had to do was like, hey, if you reach them where it's at. And then I like what you said about the village burning. I go by a slogan myself. It's called hashtag WATV, hashtag we are the village. And that's exactly what it stands for. Just we are the village. So when you look up and you see why some of these children doing things, we already know we the cause of it. We're not saying nothing about it. We're not addressing the issues, the traumas. And like I say, the little circles that they started at the schools and just trying to target the youth, it's important because they need it. Ain't nobody really asking them how they doing one on one. Every child is different. So it's always gonna be a different perspective, but you gotta reach them where they at, whatever level they on, whatever issues they got going on, you just gotta be with them where they at on that level, depending on the child. And then from there, you can kind of get them to open up and start to probably tell you, hey, if they wandering on the path of prison or something like that. Because my situation was just a domino. It was a domino effect from actions that I had taken, but it was a realization that I didn't know where I was going. And then a lot of it came from me not knowing who I was also. So bringing groups like that, bringing things like that, restorative justice programs into the mix, it's helping. It's showing that we trying to help you find yourself versus just, you know, we see kids being bad. No, they I guess they trying to focus on helping them get back to themselves, which is I hope is the most important thing, because that's what it's gonna take.
Yeah.
That's my
Yeah,
part.
thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I
Yeah.
mean, I love we are the village. There's another African proverb that says, the branches are only as good as the roots. And if we as the elders, because I'm an auntie now, the kids call me auntie because I'm over 40, so I embrace it. As we as the elders are not healed and we're not forgiving, how can the kids be? And I pulled this slide up right here. And this is where I think the biggest piece of the restorative justice circles they're missing is the teacher. The teacher holds implicit biases and feels stressed by lack of resources. If you are a parent, I'm a parent. I got a 14-year-old, so y'all gotta pray for me because I don't know. It's like Hunger Games in my house. Only the survival of the fittest at this point. I don't know what's going on. But when we do the restorative circles, I can only speak for the ones that I've witnessed. The youth come together, there's a facilitator, and they talk about the issue that happened or the infraction, and the kids talk. But no one listens to the child that did the infraction. And then the teacher is not involved and talks about their experience and that they forgive the child for actually doing the infraction. Miss Christina Jones, I see you nodding your head. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm your hallelujah choir right now. And I just want to say that is one of the biggest pieces. I really hope people who are doing restorative practices are really including teachers and vice principals, all the higher ups, because there really does become this thing of um, those feelings that we have our when our feelings get hurt, when we've been offended, when we've been, and these are the adults in the room that are supposed to be vulnerable, the ones who are supposed to be expressing and teaching our children, but their feelings get hurt just like theirs. And we are not addressing that because what happens is if you had a teacher, and especially if we're talking about special education, especially if we are talking about those parents who they themselves are overwhelmed. So we're not going to put it all on parents, but think about a teacher that's been in a classroom with behaviors that is like you said, you're at the board and you're comforting one and you're rocking with one, and then you have another one that has an outburst. That teacher herself needs to regulate her emotions or his emotions. And we have principals who are at a point where they're tired of their numbers looking a certain way. They are tired and wanting, and so we have to build something around them because they are the ones who are suspending our kids. They are the ones who we expect that after there's been an infraction that they come back into the classroom. We just automatically expect that teacher just like all of her feelings about how the situation went just evaporated, and that's not true.
Yeah.
And we got to get the teachers, not only the teachers but the vice principals, these restorative people having a talk with the adults in the room, because if we don't, then what we have is that certain kids, you will start seeing them getting punished harsher and harsher and harsher.
And before you know it, they are in jail as an adult. Thank you, Miss Jones, and that is my point. What is next? We're doing all this great work. We got the restorative circles going, but the adults don't have a voice. They're not saying what happened to them, so the child can actually say, oh, this person, this adult is also being vulnerable with me. In any relationship, vulnerability has to work both ways. So if I am going to build the resilience up in my students, I have to show them that, yes, something happened to me. Yes, you hurt my feelings. I did not like what you did. However, we are in relationship with each other for these next 6 hours, every day until you leave my classroom. How are we together going to move past this? And that deals with the teacher's implicit biases. Like Ms. Jones said, eventually I'm going to say, oh my God, this kid always doing something. And all he did was sneeze. He always disrupting the class. He has a cold. And you get mad at him for coughing. He has a runny nose, and you mad because he need a tissue. You don't need a tissue. You see that? All over the desk. So, but because no one sees that relationship as something that is important to work on, something that is important to preserve, we don't put that in place, because the only way for me to build resilience is to have a supportive community. And if my teacher feels a certain way about me still, because I did do something in our class and disrupted our classroom, and then everybody failed the test, now the principal's breathing down my neck because we didn't score high on the standardized test, I'm gonna feel some type of way. Now you got to get out my classroom. It was easier when you weren't here. And then it also goes back to the question, what happened to the kid? What are the risk and protective factors that are surrounding that child that we're also not addressing? Okay, it's 1:46. This is great. I love informal conversations, y'all. I love it. This is wonderful. So some of the solutions we already have in practice are restorative justice circles, mindfulness techniques. How many of y'all have experience with the mindfulness techniques where the kids can meditate in class? And if anyone wants to jump in and talk about their experience with that, please go right on ahead. Nope. Okay.
I use mindfulness in the school setting, um, even in restorative circles. I can use it as an icebreaker. I can use it as an opener. I could even use it after conflict has been made. A second to pause is a second to think, and a second to think is always good. I even have a trope I use about taking a second to breathe, and 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 breathing, it's natural, so you don't necessarily think about breathing unless you're going to get into some water, and then whether or not you're going to ease into the water, you're going to jump into the water, you're going to hold your nose or hold your shoulders because it's cold. You're going to take one deep breath before you go under. So yeah, so we do mindfulness.
I'm going to feel that until my clients take a second to breathe. They're gonna look at me like I'm crazy. I work with adults. Diversion programs, a lot of referrals to special education, behavioral supports, mental health, and substance treatment. So then the question is, what's next? You gave me all these things to deal with the acute issues I'm having right now. With my temper tantrum, my lack of ability to communicate, with mental health to deal with whatever trauma, complex or developmental or acute traumas I'm working with. What is next? What am I hoping to accomplish later? Where is my hope? I know how to self-regulate, but now what? We have a lot of kids who feel that they have nothing to do after they graduate high school, that feel hopeless when they go home because there is no way out. So how do we get them? And one of the things that I love that a lot of places are doing is they're doing things as far as employment services. And I know that sounds crazy. Getting kids structured to work is beyond that. Dr. Simmons and I, before everybody got on, she talked about a program like people bringing in business entrepreneurship workshops and things. But where is a program that says we have these kids that are consistently being suspended? We're going to create safe environments for them to be able to express themselves. And then we're going to give them something to do that lets them know that they have a future. Building resiliency is not just about being able to work through something and being able to survive past that one incident. It's the ability to understand that there is hope and that you have a future. And because you have hope, because you have a future, you have something worth fighting for. One of the things that we have for alternative solutions, create more mental health supports for the family, create realistic pathways to hope and resilience in children. Provide pathways for them to see how they connect to the greater community. I developed a curriculum, a community advocacy curriculum for kids. They literally look at issues that's in Baltimore that they see every day. They know there's a bunch of abandoned houses in Baltimore, but they don't know how it connects directly to them, even though it's in their neighborhood. So we show them how those things directly impact them and how they can change it, because now they feel like they have control over their circumstance. If I have control over my circumstance, I'm able to understand that I can change it. Create realistic plans and interventions. And this goes back to a point that was made earlier. Everything can't be cookie cutter. We can't just look at interventions as this is what the standard IEP says. This does not work for this child. What works for this child? What out of the box intervention can we think of? I spent the morning sitting with horses all day, and it was the most peaceful thing in the world. I was at a Black-owned ranch in Baltimore, and we were talking about how in the last year, they served 17,000 children who were referred to them between Pennsylvania and Maryland, who were referred to them by Department of Juvenile Services. 17,000 kids. And out of that group, they had like a 2% recidivism rate. You know why? They gave hope to the kids. It's something amazing when you get to take care of an animal. You get to watch it grow. When someone else depends on you, it builds resilience. You want to do better. You want to be there because you know this thing needs you. And then they learn employment skills on top of that. So they know that after I graduate high school and my mother is unable to work and all of these other things, I can provide for my family. It gives hope. It gives structure. It provides them a reason to say, I can be resilient. So as you move forward in your professions, how you work with the youth, really think about how all of these systems come into play. I know you guys do already. I can tell by this group that is what everyone is focused on. And I also understand the systemic and institutional issues that we face in order to get the resources to make these things happen. So how can we pull community together to create programs that really impact everything that youth have to deal with? Do we know any ASE certified mechanics that's in the neighborhood that have zero issues taking one of the kids under their wing and showing them how to work on cars and then helping them train to become an ASE mechanic? Do we know of any corner stores that can train kids on how to own a business? Because everyone needs food. How are we thinking outside of the box and using our natural supports, natural resources to create programs that not only deal with the immediate risk factors, but create environments of emotional safety, which also builds resilience in kids? And with that, I am finished. I would love to hear more from you guys. So if anyone has any comments, questions, concerns, feedback, I would love to hear it. No one has anything?
Just thank you.
I would like to say that this was an outstanding and engaging presentation. And from the chat box and the comments that we have received, we're very grateful. I'm excited that there are apparently a number of educators in the audience, and we hope that you will continue along with our juvenile officers and other juvenile professionals to participate and to work with us. You may not know that the Missouri Juvenile Justice Association does have a restorative justice program headed by Jen Phillips, and that they are in 5 counties, and they're working with many of the school districts. And they've had certain districts that have been models that we can point to and say that they were successful with their restorative circles, with educators there, community representatives and all. But on today's presentation, Shannon McFadden, you were dynamic, and this audience was very, very receptive. So before I turn it over to, I see that Beverly has some comments and some others. So before I turn it over to Liz, and I know that didn't I see Jeffrey Barlow, our executive director? Oh, Jeff, you have any comments before I turn it over?
Just fantastic. Thanks for the engagement and all the interaction. Fantastic presentation. Just exciting. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Beverly, did you have something that you wanted to say?
Hi, I really enjoyed this. I'm so glad that I tuned in. One thing I want to say is that I'm part of the pre-employment transition program in Missouri, and we go into juvenile facilities, and that is our way of trying to give the young men and women hope and sort of a direction for after they, are released or whatever. And we expose them to different jobs. We talk about workplace readiness skill. That's one of the biggest things. How do you get a job? But then once you get the job, how do you keep it? So, really working on those soft skills with our students just to know how do you process when things don't go your way. We don't process things as usual. We have to have, a procedure. So anyway, I just want you to know that's what we're trying to do in Missouri in all of our schools, but also our juvenile facilities. And thank you.
Beverly, can I ask you to post that right quick, your contact, so that between Justice and Liz and some of us, we can have this where others who might want to be in contact with you, we can assist in connecting.
Certainly. I will figure out how to do that.
Okay. Liz?
Yes. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. I did put the link to the survey in the chat box. Please take the time to complete that. It just takes a minute. And also, I am sharing the flyer for our next month's session. It'll be on November 19th for, it's titled Race for What with our author and speaker, JD Mass. Sign up is available on stopRED.org. I can also put the link to register in the chat box. Thank you so much to Shannon and for everyone. It's so good to see everyone, and I hope to see you next month.
Thank you, guys. This was amazing. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Dr. Simmons, for having me.
You were amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.